Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Dear friends, this is the Sunday, 1 week after our celebration of Vesak. This is actually an important anniversary, part of the waning moon, half of the Vesak season. On this day, the remains of the Buddha's body were cremated. And so 1 more week, when we come to the dark moon, will finally be the conclusion of this Vesak season. For those of us who live near the country and have a chance to be able to see the moon, it's a very nice, isn't it, to feel being in tune with the with those cycles, so that you can see how at the full moon, how the energy can be very full, and then at the dark moon, it's really dark, and it can be really quiet, very peaceful, very withdrawn for meditation. Today, we thought of discussing the Sacitta Sutta, which is number 10.51 in the Numerical Discourses. This is a sutta that we discussed last Tuesday in combination with some other things. So we went over it briefly, but I don't think it will hurt you to hear about the same sutta 2 times. I have read the sutta about 20 or 30 times during the past week, and it hasn't hurt me one bit. So I'm just opening the screen briefly so that you can see the name of the sutta. Here we're in the this is the sutta central version of it. So it's number 10. It's the book of tens, the book with 10 things, and number 51 in that book. And this decade, these 10 suttas, starting with 51, are about reviewing. And this one is about your own mind. This sutta is not very complicated, so if you don't mind, I'd like to just read it out to you and go over some of the terms. This sutta is about reviewing oneself or checking on oneself. This one is designed to remedy if one does a review and you notice certain defilements, certain negative qualities, certain toxic or harmful traits that still exist within the mind, then you would undertake to remove those negativities. But if you notice that the negativities are not present, that one is clear of them, then one can be happy and glad and go on to the next section, which would be the practice of meditation. This sutta is assuming that you have already established your sila, your morality, It's an aspect of mindfulness. Citta Nupassana is the mindful contemplation of the mind, being aware of the state of mind. Or you could say that in the Dhamma Nupassana, the awareness of Dhammas, that's an aspect of that is the traits or the factors, the mental factors which are present. So the 10 factors that are listed here are very interesting because they're partly similar to the 5 hindrances. And we believe that this was an earlier version of the teaching that later on became compiled into the 5 hindrances. And you have many suttas teaching about 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are factors which cloud the mind, block wisdom, and prevent a person from being able to enter into deeper meditation. In this sutta, if you are able to take care of the factors in this sutta, it culminates in going on to practicing meditation, and then with meditation, coming to the final destruction of the taints, the destruction of the asavas, which is an epithet for a full awakening. Another parallel or a related sutta to this one is called Vitakka Santana. That's the number 20 in the middle length discourses. It's a very famous sutta that has 5 methods of getting rid of disruptive or afflictive thoughts. So in this sutta, you would recognize the existence of those afflictive or harmful qualities or traits. And in the Vitakka Santana Sutta, you would get rid of them. There's another sutta that we might even talk about next week that's closely related to this. It's called Parihana. And that's 10.55. And that sutta seems to be an early version of the list that subsequently became compiled into the 10 fetters, the 10 samyojanas, or the 10 factors that are keeping us attached to the cycle of rebirth and preventing us from coming to a full awakening or full enlightenment at the end of rebirth. So this sutta is, I'm thinking of these factors in terms of how they affect on meditation. And then if we come on another occasion to the Parihana Sutta, we'd think about a similar list of factors in terms of how those factors are blocking our final liberation. So here's the sutta. The Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. He addressed the bhikkhus. He said, "O bhikkhus, Venerable Sir," they replied. And the Buddha said this: if a bhikkhu, or we could say if a meditator, isn't skilled in the ways of another's mind, then they should train themselves. I will be skilled in the ways of my own mind. To me, this is an example of the very gentle and kindly sort of a humor that the Buddha had. Being skilled in another person's mind is It's a factor called Cetta Pariyana, comprehending the minds of others. And this is one of the superhuman powers that is gained by a person who's very close to awakening. Many meditators, many followers of these teachings are very far away from having that superhuman ability to read the minds of others and to know the qualities. Even it's possible to obtain the full awakening and not get this particular superpower. As long as you know about the destruction of taints, it's not necessarily so that you would have these other superhuman powers. But so here the Buddha, perhaps I couldn't find a background story about this sutta in the commentary, but perhaps the monks were having some sort of discussion about superhuman powers. And Buddha saying, well, at least if you would know your own mind, that would be even more marvelous and wonderful than being able to know the mind of another. So sometimes the things which are sort of like magical or mythological or superhuman, I mean, knowing the mind of others is not that, it's not that super. We know a lot of great teachers who have that capacity. It's something that can be developed. But sometimes the Buddha will set up the marvelous and wonderful things, and then he comes down and comes down to something that's just a fundamental, basic practice of the Dhamma that everybody needs. And the part that's the more basic is the part that he says really singling out for praise. So he said this how many hundreds of times or multi-hundreds of times in the sutras. The Buddha said that one should know one's own mind. And so then how do you know your own mind? Now here comes the metaphor. Suppose there was a woman or man who was young, youthful, fond of adornments, and they check on their own reflection in a clean, bright mirror or a clear bowl of water. If they see any dirt or blemish there, they would try to remove it. So that clean, bright mirror, I would say, is mindfulness, which is able to remember to pay attention, remember to be aware, to see the phenomenon as they really are, and is also able to recognize what is helpful and what is harmful, and doesn't have that confusion between helpful and harmful. So if they see any dirt or any blemish, they try to remove it. But if they don't see any dirt or blemish there, they'd be happy with that, as they've got all they wished for. How fortunate that I'm clean. So in the same way, he says that this checking or reviewing, paccavekkhana, is very helpful for developing the skillful qualities. Now here comes 10 factors. First, am I often given to longings or without longings? Longing is abhijalu, and that is quite similar. It's almost a synonym with sensuous desire, which is given in many other places as one of the 5 hindrances, is this sensuous desire, this kama chanda. The longing is something that's it has the root word in it is ja, which is related to jayati or meditation. But instead of the meditation, which is simply knowing what's present and simply directing awareness to rest on the object. Instead, this abhi means like a reaching out for something, wanting something that doesn't exist, longing for something. So that's why it has that aspect of craving. It's trying to get something that's not there. And we can see how it's almost like a miccha samadhi is like wrong meditation or wrong concentration. If you are meditating on, I want to be rich, and how am I going to be rich? Or I want to be elected as the senator, and how am I going to get elected as a senator? And what are all the things I got to do to do about this, and all of the planning and cogitating and thinking and imagining and visualizing that you do because of wanting. That is something that I was trying to explain it this morning. There's something that you can see, there's something that is potentially good in it, but it's misdirected. If this concentration is directed towards a materialistic, unnoble end, which is filled with craving, that's no good. But on the other hand, when you see how much energy and how much persistence a person can have towards that unnoble end, if you could just change it by 10 degrees, you could go from abhijalu, which is longing, over to jayati, which is meditation. And you could bring that same quality of finding something really interesting, really fascinating, something that you really wish to stay on and really wish to, you've got the motivation and energy for it. So, but if it's abhijalu, that is greed. It's wanting, it's not being satisfied with what you got. This abhijja is listed in many different places as a negative factor. So that's the first one. Abhijalu, longing, almost the same as greed, almost the same as sensuous desire. Then the second one, am I often given to ill will or without ill will? And that ill will is exactly the second hindrance. It's called vyapada. So ill will, you can actually compare it to an illness. It's like a disorder of bile. I think is what, if somebody is bilious, that's how a person could be if their mind is overtaken with ill will. So that would be a settled dislike, settled aversion, a distortion of the mind, which sees what's bad and unpleasant in the thing that you hate, or the person that you hate, which wants to get away from it, that makes you want to close down and turn away and push away from that kind of object. Both of this longing and this ill will are causing instability in the mind, and they're two faces of the same factor. A person who has got a lot of greed could at the same time have a lot of hatred, and it puts them on a kind of a roller coaster of loving this and hating that, and loving this and hating that. And so the more, like if you're in a circumstance that you really hate, the more you hate your life, the more easily you will be sucked into loving something that you are greedy for. And so the allowing the nourishing greed is almost like a way of running away from aversion. So that's the second of these 10 factors, which is equal to the second one of the 5 hindrances. Then the third one is called Tina Midha. Am I often overcome with dullness and drowsiness, or free from dullness and drowsiness? Sometimes Tina Midha is called sloth and torpor. These are 2 words that are very often paired together, and they sort of have a very similar meaning. You're not completely asleep, but you're not really awake. You're in a twilight zone. You can't really do anything. If you're trying to meditate, you may find it difficult to stay awake, difficult to stay upright. This is a meditation where we're going over like that, falling over. And during meditation, there's a lot of interaction among these factors, isn't there? Do you notice how when you dislike something or a certain situation, sometimes it makes you very sleepy? Like a dislike, actually greed and dislike both are really tiresome, but especially dislike is extremely tiresome. And then it gets the combination of disliking and sleepiness becomes boredom. So having a lack of direction, a lack of energy is so normal. If you don't know where you're going, you can be, you can lose your energy, you lose your momentum. And then sometimes the opposite, like the possessing energy, can come about at a moment of insight when understanding something, some circumstance or some situation, an aspect of understanding is that we know what to do about it. So if there's some interpersonal situation and I don't understand really what's going on, then I'm sort of trapped. I can't go in one direction or another direction. And so then it can become quite static. But then understanding the circumstances, also I say, this is happening because some reason, because this is happening because I'm afraid. If I let go of fear, then I'm able to go forward. Or this is happening because I am getting a headache due to the pollen that we have at this time. And if I would just remember to turn on the air purifier, then I wouldn't be so affected by pollen. I wouldn't have the headache. And then this whole interpersonal mess would not have happened or won't happen again because I'll be bright having just taken care of something simple. So knowing what the trouble is, knowing what the disease is also knowing what the cure is, knowing what to do. And that is energizing. So ignorance and or not seeing clearly is very close to this sloth and torpor. In the metaphors, it's compared to being in prison, or elsewhere it's compared to a muddy pond. You can't see what's at the bottom of the pool because the water is muddy. And generating interest in meditation, if the meditation is dull and boring. If you can find a way of looking at it that meditation becomes fascinating, then that's also a way to overcome that. So that's Tinamida. So one aspect is being overwhelmed with this dullness and drowsiness, or sloth and torpor. And then the other one, in Pali, it's called Vigata Tinamida. It means the dullness and drowsiness disappeared. So it's, it's like you've been in a fog and the fog clears and we've got bright sun. So it's disappeared, it's gone. The fog and cloudiness and the coolness that we had this morning is completely gone, and we just have a clear, bright sun at this moment. I'm going to go a little bit further and then pause for questions or comments. The next one is, am I often restless or calm? The restlessness in this sutta is called uddato, which is got the definition of being overstimulated, agitated, overexcited, flurried, elevated, high, manic. And then the opposite of it is said to be not puffed up, not overexcited, not flurried, or being calm. So in this way, it's described almost in physical words. It seems to be describing a kind of emotional reactivity, where one has become agitated because of something that's triggering, and both the body and mind are restless. Not in the sutta, but in the 5 hindrances, this is paired up with another word, which is called kukucha. So these words, as we have fun, those of us who know Pali, we just enjoy pronouncing the Pali words in order to make a interesting sound. So it's udacha kukucha, udacha kukucha. So kukucha has one meaning is being agitated behavior with the hands and feet. So fidgeting with the hands and feet is part of kukucha. And then another meaning is a regret over past wrongdoings. So in the hindrance of udacha kukucha, it's considered that this restlessness or this stimulation is related to remorse because of some kind of wrongdoing. Here's a bit of a commentary. I'm just going to read this off to you. In a Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, regret is fidgeting with the hands and fidgeting with the feet, or fidgeting with the hands and the feet. A regret is arising because of the perception of what is not allowable as allowable, the perception of what is allowable as not allowable, the perception of the improper time as the proper time, perception of the proper time as the improper time, perception of what is blameless as blameworthy, perception of what is blameworthy as blameless. So this is like a complete moral confusion, a complete confusion about what's skillful and not skillful. And in that case, I kind of do take it back to emotion, because somebody who just follows their emotion doesn't have any guidance from any kind of a sense about right and wrongs, beneficial or not beneficial. They just follow whatever comes up emotionally. Then he speaks about After this, there's regret, compunction, mental remorse, uneasiness of mind is called regret. And this is the commentator. Regret arises for two reasons, because of what was done and because of what was not done. How so? Regret arises when one thinks, I have engaged in bodily misconduct. I have not engaged in bodily good conduct, like was verbal or mental misconduct, engaged in, not engaged in mental good conduct. Or else regret arises when one thinks, I have not fulfilled good behavior, guarding the doors of the sense faculties, moderating and eating, devotion to wakefulness, mindfulness, and clear comprehension, the four establishments of mindfulness, all of the factors of awakening up to the Noble Eightfold Paths. I have not fully understood suffering, abandoned its origin, developed the path, and realized cessation. So then one would feel regret. And now here is someone who is a serious practitioner, who's not just reacting to emotions, who has a sense of what's skillful or not skillful, moral or not moral. And nevertheless, they continue to be beset with worry and remorse because they've not yet completed the journey. They have not yet done everything that should be done. They've not yet obtained their liberation. If they were somebody in the monastic form, they could worry and think, I've been accepting alms food for several years, and I still have not obtained liberation. And they could feel very worried and upset and disturbed in the mind about that, burning with remorse. But the Buddha advises that we should practice the path, we should practice for these things, but we should not be dominated by remorse in that way. He doesn't recommend remorse as being a good factor of the mind that you want to develop. Now I'm going to do one more and then we're going to pause. The fifth factor in this list of 10 is also the fifth of the 5 hindrances. And this is also one that we love to say in Pali. It's called vicikiccha. Vichikkati. So V could be like a not, or it's either special or it's either a special or it's something that's makes it negative, a lack of something. And then chikichati is it's related to chaitana or chintati. It's related to thinking. And I learned a new word. It's a desiderative word, and that means wanting. So it means wanting to think. And vichikiccha means I don't want to think. I, in a funny kind of way, I always felt, before I read this this week, I always had the idea that this skeptical doubt is a disease of people who think too much, and they don't know how to check in their own heart what is going in the directions of calmness, freedom, and true happiness. or what is going in the direction of disturbance, reactivity, and harm. So by not being in tune and able to observe internally with the state of their own mind and body, then they're just like dealing at this very shallow, like intellectual level. And intellectuals who are not deep, to me, are people who can become very skeptical. And they're thinking all the time because they don't really know. They don't know for themselves because they've not realized it for themselves. But in what the commentator thought it's the opposite, that if you don't want to think about it, if you're sort of like in denial or something like that, then you have vicikiccha. The opposite of it is called tinna vicikiccho. Tinna vicikiccho. The tinna refers to crossing over. So one who has crossed over or gone beyond is free from skeptical doubt because they know directly for themselves, because they have crossed over. They've escaped from doubt because they have experienced directly for themselves. They're not depending on somebody else's promise to know which way to go or what's right or what's wrong. They have their own independent knowledge. So then this is the doubt, the hindrance of skeptical doubt. It's often described in the suttas as being skeptical doubt related to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Or it could be doubt about things past and future, doubt about conditionality, that is causation. You don't really know for sure if this causes that. Or being uncertain about what's wholesome or not wholesome. This is the part that always seemed very true to me, that if you're not tuned enough to be able to recognize what's wholesome. And then also on Tuesday, Richard mentioned that doubt can be the doubt about oneself. So one can think, there is causation, there is enlightenment, there are beings who have realized for themselves the completion of the work, being beyond birth and death, having done what had to be done. But I will never be able to be a part of that. This practice is not going to work for me. It's not possible for me to do this practice. And that's a kind of doubt. And that can really stop a person from being successful. I want to pause now for a discussion and ask if any of you have either questions or what you can report from your own experiences about how these factors can make it impossible to meditate, or they can really block meditation. You can make a lot of effort to attend a 3-day retreat, and you had to exert so much effort taking care of your house, your jobs, your pets, and your children. And by the time you finally get to the 3-day retreat, you're so exhausted that you can't even stay upright. You've got this extreme exhaustion, or else being exhausted because you're just tired of life, or you run your life on so much stimulation to keep going, that then if you stop all the stimulation and become quiet, the first thing that happens is being really exhausted. You see, that's just one example. But others may have other examples. Okay, Ren.
Thank you. The portion about doubt really resonated with me. For me, it's more doubt over skepticism, because it's not about, on the surface, to me, it's like, oh, what's right, what's wrong, but deep down, it's about what's safe and what's not safe. And I don't often so deeply not feeling safe for whatever reason, right? Then it becomes a doubt. Is this the right thing to do? Is that going to be the safest? In other words, and that's really a hindrance. And it appeared as a lot of this intellectualized skepticism, but it really isn't skepticism. It's more about, if I do this, am I going to be gullible? And if I believe in it, maybe I'm being gullible and maybe it's not safe. So it's that back and forth that was the most challenging for me.
Right. Oh, that's such a good example of a factor that is 5 degrees away from being wholesome. Like if you go just this way, it's really beneficial. And if you go this way, it's harmful. So like if you meet a teacher, or if you hear, find a book or find a discourse, you do want to investigate whether that teacher is trustworthy or not. You'd like to know if their ethics are good, if they are become like swelled up by fame, or whether they keep their humility even if they're famous. You want to know if they behave the same way in private that they do when they're on the stage. You want to know, you just want to check out some of those basic things about their honesty in order to have a protection from, in a gullible way, you meet somebody charismatic and then you swallow the hook and then they lead you in some direction that might not be beneficial. So in that way, questioning and doubt to find out, to ascertain what's beneficial, and then trying out what they're teaching, what's being suggested, and checking internally with yourself to see, is it beneficial while I'm trying out these methods? The Dhamma is supposed to, of Buddhism is supposed to be good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. So in those ways, taking care of one's safety is a good thing. But on the other hand, if it becomes compulsive, then it can become a hindrance. You're not willing to really try out the teaching because you don't want to let go. You mentioned anxiety or fear, and a lot of times these things are in layers. So you could consider that fear is a kind of aversion. If you're afraid of something, you're averse to it. You're afraid that you'll be killed or harmed or something like that if you encounter this frightening thing. But if you find out how to let go of fear, then you may find that takes care of the skepticism. Yes, indeed. So do question, but don't let doubt be so. And then in the fetters, Vicikiccha is one of the first fetters. So you're afraid of being either you're too gullible and you believe some phony guru somewhere because you're too gullible, or else you're too skeptical, and you have somebody who's a true teacher who's teaching you the true Dhamma that could help save your life, but because you're so skeptical, you won't take them. So, like, you're between Scylla and Charybdis. Are you going to make the mistake of being too gullible with the bad teacher, or too skeptical towards the good teacher? But when you do your own work, practice your sati sampajanya, your mindfulness and clear comprehension for yourself, and when you get your own knowledge, then the other problems completely fade away. You don't have to worry about what any teacher is saying. You can always check it against your own experience, and that's when you're really safe from that hindrance of skeptical doubt.
Yeah, I think that is the heart of it. It wasn't like I was doubting people or afraid to believe in teachers or people. It's more like the concept itself. I don't know if the idea is something. I doubt the idea itself. I think I have a hard time believing in my own experience. Right? That is the heart of it. You just
Okay.
pointed that out perfectly.
Good. Well, you can work with that and see if you can develop confidence in your own experience as being really essential to progress. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll come to Damon.
Thank you. Let's see. So, impediments to my practice, to my meditation. So I'm coming up on a 6-month cancer screening that I have to do every 6 months for a while. And in meditation, it's hard to concentrate because I'm having a lot of feelings and sensations and thoughts of despair and sadness, strong attachment to self, and attachment to health, good health. And so, yeah, I would like to not have to be experiencing these type of feelings. They're very distracting during meditation.
Right.
Yeah, so attachment to permanence, yeah, that type of thing.
So in this case, the grief and sorrow over health, the worry, is something that it will be nice to be able to just put them aside for a while in order to have some meditation time to take a break from worrying and to just have the peace and tranquility of meditation. And it, in a way, that allows a certain kind of healing of the mind. But sometimes it's necessary to be present for something which is sad and painful. And if I say, I wanted to live to a very healthy, long life, and I might not have a long life, I might not have a healthy life, and there's a sorrow there, there's a pain there. Part of going through that is being able to accept that at this point it's part of what you have. And you may find that by being present for what's really difficult, at least you don't have that constant restlessness that you have when you're trying to run away from something that's difficult. And then if you watch it closely, you will find that actually the mind has got a self-healing quality that it becomes able to get past the grief and upset, to come to a point of acceptance. So, I mean, I wanted to, well, there were people in my life who I loved very much who passed away. And at the time, it was just impossible to be happy about it. And there was a kind of like a mental, psychological, a real serious disturbance that went on for a long time. But then later on, there's something that's like diminished in the sense of not having those people still that have passed away. But I'm not disturbed or burning with grief and sorrow. Instead, when I think about what has gone before, it's just something that was, and now it's gone. So in this particular question you're asking, I'm not going to suggest that you try to torture yourself by directing your mind towards focusing on the problems. You don't have to go looking for trouble in meditation. Trouble will find you anyway. So you look for peace, like you take a peaceful subject like the breath, and just stay with the peaceful subject with the expectation of having a calm, peaceful, present moment awareness. But then when worry, sorrow, grief, or pain comes along, just be present for that. Acknowledge it for what it is. Know that it, because of conditions, this is what you got right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And then when you can, come back to the peaceful meditation.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I want to finish this sutta, so I'm going to go back to the last set of 5 in the teaching. Now, this last Tuesday, we were talking about this same sutta, and Richard had pointed out something that was in Bhikkhu Bodhi's footnote. In the Chinese Agama, which is parallel to this sutta, they have got a slightly different list of factors, which makes the whole list equivalent to the 5 spiritual faculties, which are 5 positive faculties. And on the Chinese version, it's saying, am I lacking faith or do I have faith? Do I lack mindfulness or do I have mindfulness? Am I foolish or am I wise? And then the 2 pairs that are overlapping are, am I without energy or with energy? Am I without concentration or with concentration? So that's a parallel text. In this text, it doesn't quite fit in such a neat way with that other list of factors. And in a certain way, the 6 through 10 are partly related. Well, let's just go through them and see how they fit. 6 is, am I often angry or without anger? So anger and ill will are 2 things that are very close to each other. I think in the 5 hindrances, when you talk about the hindrance of ill will, you could include anger as being an aspect of that. Anger is more like the emotional thing that flares up And it especially flares up when someone is done you wrong, and then you feel angry at that person. It's definitely got a lot of energy. And in a certain way, I've heard people say that anger is a good thing because it gives you energy. My friend was bicycling in the East Coast on the C&O Canal in the dead of winter on a solo backpacking bicycle trip in the snow and ice in the middle of the winter by herself. And her bicycle slipped on the ice and started to go off the bank of the trail there, going down towards the Potomac River. She sort of caught it, and she was sort of like with one hand holding onto a tree or something, and on the other hand holding onto this heavy bicycle loaded with backpacking gear, trying to see how to save the bicycle and not fall into the icy river. And she told me that she got angry and picked up that heavy bike and threw it up onto the trail and then climbed up. So in that way, I guess, probably like at the animal level, or like, if a car has on top of your child and you lift the car up to let the child get loose, or if an alligator has got a hold of your child and you pry, it's very hard to do if you pry the mouth of the alligator open because you want to save your child. That's the kind of like strength that you get that's associated with anger. And a little bit later on, we're talking about energy. And so energy is a positive factor, and you want that heroic strength, but you don't want it in the form of anger. You don't want it in the form of antagonism or the wish to harm that person who did you wrong. There really was another person. I used to go hiking a lot, and I was hiking in Florida, and we came to this spot where it's like every tree had a big orange blot of spit paint on it. And what had happened is this stupid couple was wandering around on this trail, and they left their child to go be behind them. And an alligator got the child. And they rushed back, and the mother pried open the alligator's mouth to rescue the child from the alligator. And then they were so angry that they took the spray paint and defaced that part of the forest. So you should, there's a small degree of difference between what can be just a trait that we have that we can use it in a good way, or we can use it in a bad way. If we use it to harm our enemy, or if we use it to make ourselves ill by having letting the anger settle down to a settled, fixed dislike, then it makes us ill, and it evolves into that vyapada, or that ill will. That's the sixth factor. The seventh factor is translates is my mind often defiled or undefiled? Sankilita Chito. kilesas is a kind of a very general, broad term for many different kinds of afflictive traits and qualities that can affect the mind. In this particular sutta, I think my idea here is something being stained or tarnished is quite close to the asavas, or the taints, the impurities of the mind. And the meditation that I would do here is, are the asavas still a factor for me? Are they still in me, or are they gone? A mind which is undefiled, which has no more defilement left, that's a one that the taints have been wiped out. We'll circle back in a few minutes to the taints, because that's sort of the culmination of the sutta. The eighth factor is my body often agitated or unagitated? And in this case, the Pali word is called saradha, and it is related to violence and anger. So it's almost like there's the mental anger and the bodily anger. So it's like when you're getting ready to attack that alligator, it's like, what's going on in your body at that moment? Is your body flooded with adrenaline? Is it flooded with adrenaline that is going to be there for about 10 or 20 minutes, the amount of time you need to rescue your child? Are you in a never-ending cycle where you're constantly having too much adrenaline in the body, constantly being pressured or tense, carrying that tension, that agitation, that readiness to take off? Or as I sometimes feel like, do I have a loaded gun in my pocket? In the sense that, like, the body is like ready to flare up into that angry kind of reaction. Then so that's the eighth of the factors. It's very similar to the factor of restlessness. So in a way, having the agitated body or being restless, you can see how when the 10 was collapsed into 5, maybe they just got sort of summarized down into 5 things. And then the next one is, am I often lazy or energetic? Okay, so again, this is very close to tinamita, sloth or torpor. So laziness is the laziness of the full granary. Like, you already got your wealth and something, you got a comfortable life and a beautiful house and a good job and all those things. And it might be, if you were energetic enough to become wealthy like that, you're an energetic kind of person. But if it was your parents who were energetic and you're the child who's just the beneficiary, then that can be like a sort of depressing laziness. So the opposite of being lazy is stirring up energy, stirring up effort. And then the last one is, am I often unconcentrated or concentrated? The word is samahita, which mean collected or composed in mind. So am I distracted or composed? is the mind in 100 different places, or is it able to settle and to become unified? So if you know that you have any of these qualities, then you would apply intense desire, effort, perseverance, or fortitude, and mindfulness and clear comprehension in order to get rid of those bad, harmful qualities. So we recommend, this is seems very cruel to say when people are suffering with these qualities. Like if somebody is suffering from grief, they've just had a divorce or their loved one died, and you say, well, this grief is a hindrance, you should get rid of it. Well, as teachers, we have to be gentle and careful in saying such a thing, because it could be interpreted as cruelty. But actually, we don't want those qualities to settle and take hold and become permanent. We want them to pass by. And if we have got these negative qualities that have become strongly embedded and fixed into the mind, we want to get rid of them by making right effort. And the effort has to be based on being willing to persevere. One is the energy, so that's like the push or the step on the gas. Another part is persevering, so you keep going. And the other thing is mindfulness. So you've got your eyes on the road and you know where you're going, whether you're going left or right, or whether you're still on the road or going off the road, or whether there's any other obstacles coming along. So with mindfulness, you know where you're at and what you're doing. And then with this clear comprehension, this sampajanya, that's what you use for steering. So it's no use just stepping on the gas if you're not steering. The clear comprehension, especially in daily life as well as in meditation, knowing this is the purpose and the suitability of what you do. Like, why am I washing the dishes? For the health of my own self and my dear friends, so that we'll have sanitary dishes tomorrow. There's suitability, like, is it the right time? Should I be crashing around in the kitchen washing dishes during the time when I'm supposed to be with my colleagues meditating in the hall? No, not the right time. Not suitable at that moment. Or should I be doing dishes while they're trying to have a community meeting in the same room? No, that's not suitable. So you know the purpose and the suitability. And then there's something called domain. And what that really means is, if you've got like a meditation practice that you're doing, try not to abandon that practice while you go through the daily routines of life. So if you're meditating to reflect on impermanence, then as you go through the whole day, you constantly watching out, saying, well, is that permanent or is it impermanent? You keep making that same inquiry through the day. Or if you're on metta, you keep, like, throughout the day, you wash the dishes with metta, you put the dishes away with metta, you sort out the refrigerator with metta. Everything you do, you're doing it with metta, with kindness, if that's the theme that you're trying to develop. And so then if you keep that going throughout daily life, then when you come down to the time that's available for you to meditate, you'll be able to quickly and easily get into the meditation theme that you set for yourself. And then the last one is clear comprehension, which is kind of like the wisdom aspect. So sampajanya, clear comprehension, leads to wisdom. You just try to know what you're doing. Like, what am I doing now? I'm giving a Dhamma talk, right? And then why? For what reason am I doing a Dhamma talk? Is this the suitable time to give a Dhamma talk? Am I keeping my meditation theme still going at some level during it? And then can I see that even this Dhamma talk is a fabrication, which is impermanent and which will come to an end in a couple of minutes. And that this Dhamma talk is not the final refuge. If your clothes or your head was on fire, in order to extinguish it, you'd apply intense enthusiasm, effort, zeal, vigor, perseverance, and you would keep going until you got the fire put out. So it's like that. If you're in a rut and you think that you're not able to, or it's not important to take care of the negative habits, to try to denourish them and allow them to fade away and disappear, or to cause them to disappear, then you should think of the danger being like that, like a fire. You should be like a man or a woman, young and youthful, who suddenly realized that the carcass of a dog or a human being has been hung around their neck. And then you would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted, and you would want to get rid of it. So that's how they want you to stir up whatever you need to get rid of these unskillful qualities. But if, upon checking, you know that you have the opposite of those bad qualities. I'm often content and without longing. I'm often kind-hearted without ill will. I'm often free from dullness and drowsiness. I'm often free from doubt. I'm often full of metta and free from anger, pure in mind, undisturbed in the body, energetic, and well collected in the mind, or immersed in samadhi. Then with those qualities, I would practice meditation. And the point of the meditation is to finally come to the end of the defilements. So this is the Sacitta Sutta. I mentioned the parallel in the Chinese Agama. I mentioned the Parihana Sutta that we might study next time, that's about like an early version of the 10 Fetters. And there are many other teachings about different kinds of reflections, things that ought to be reflected upon over and over again. So this is my sutta reflection for you. I went a little bit slower than I wanted to go. I apologize for that. If anyone has a question and would like to stay on to ask and answer a question or to comment on this teaching, then I welcome you for that. Again, this teaching seems to be an early version of what later became boiled down to the 5 hindrances, which is for the purpose of getting rid of the factors that prevent meditation and developing factors, the opposite factors that support meditation. Okay, Sheila.
Thank you, Aya. One quick question. The connection with the 10 paramis, are those also anecdotes to the hindrances and the I guess, agamas? Or how are they connected?
Um, we the paramis are in the early Buddhist texts. The paramis are developed as the factors that were developed by the Bodhisattva on his way to Buddhahood. And so in that case, it's not exactly the same thing as the five hindrances, but there's certainly ways of going to the tremendous extreme in developing these beautiful, wholesome qualities to the nth degree with a great deal of power, so that they're so powerful that they could support the enlightenment of a Sammasambuddha. The paramis are very well developed in the Mahayana traditions. In the Theravada traditions, we see them a lot in the Jataka stories, which are stories about the previous lifetimes of the Bodhisattva before his awakening. And we also see them in some of the texts that were a little bit later texts, but not that much in the five Nikayas, the five basic books of the suttas. And when we do see them, they're connected with the career of the Bodhisattva. Yeah. I think you've asked about paramis before, and if you keep asking, we're going to have to look into it and give a class or give a program on the paramis, because I think this must be an important aspect of practice for you.
Maybe I should stop asking and.
No, it's okay to keep asking. That's how you get answers. So please look up the sutta, read it over 3 or 4 times, or maybe 20 times, and think about actually doing that reflection, like literally make it like a checklist. And don't just notice like scout doubt was present in me. If you notice like, for a minute, I forgot to be doubtful, or I forgot to be skeptical, and I was faithful for a minute. For a minute, I forgot to be angry, and I was free of anger. I was completely free of anger for 1 minute. And so the freedom from these states is something that's really worthy of noticing. And especially if we have difficulties in life, we're not, under the burden of our difficulties and challenges all the time. Sometimes we have there's so many moments in the day, and there's many, many millions of moments in which we are free from those negative factors. So if we can notice the moments of freedom, appreciate them, as well as noticing, we got to not be biased. We just notice when those negative factors are present. First, just see them and acknowledge them, what they are. And then we may find out how to release them, possibly using the 5 methods in the Vitakka Santana Sutta. Let us close by
Can I have
giving.
one more question?
Okay,
please?
one more question. Yes.
Okay. Something you said a couple of Sundays back, or that has sort of been sticking in my mind. So I figured I'd like to ask you to elaborate a little bit on it. I think it was a comment you said, we make our world and then we have to live in it.
Yes.
Does that sound like something you said?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So could you say a little bit more?
Well, if we think that people are basically evil, and it's no use doing them a favor because they'll just take advantage of you. And we should be always on guard because people are trying to hurt us, and we should be ready to protect ourselves from somebody who's trying to hurt us. If that's like what we believe, our worldview, we're actually creating a world which is very filled with conflicts and negativity. And then we sort of bring out in others reactions that are reflecting our own beliefs or our own view. But if we think the world is that people are basically good, and that I should do good things, and I just expect that somehow or other, if I do good, that the universe is going to pay me back, and that good things will come back to me, like putting bread on the waters. I just keep putting good deeds out into the world, and more good deeds, and I just have the confidence that goodness will come back to me, and it does come back, and it does create a circumstance. So in terms of the idea of rebirth, if you like if I believe that I'm bad and I deserve to burn in hell, then my life today has got a hellish quality to it. And then if I die with that belief, then I can be born in hell, and I can stay there as long as I think I deserve to suffer. So in that way, over multi-lives, that happens. But in terms of how like culture is created, we sort of like create a culture, and we live in a world, or we see what matches our expectations, what matches our views, and so that becomes like we're living in the castle that we created with our minds. Now, when we took a human birth and got born into a particular situation with a particular family, a particular historical moment, a particular cultural moment, a particular genetic moment, there is a way in which we inherited a mixed bag, that we got born as the kind of creature who experiences a mixture of pain and pleasure. And in Buddhism, we believe that it's the karmic result of the previous causation in the previous lifetimes that we got born into this realm, which is that kind of a mixed bag. Officially, I could say I'm a Pollyanna, and I think, oh, how nice it is that I got a mixture of pain and pleasure, because the moments of pain helped me to see where I needed to do the work in order to come out of it. That I would not have had a chance to, I would not have had the motivation to learn this Dhamma and learn the way to the end of suffering if I never experienced any pain. In other words, if I had been born as an angel in heaven, where everything was pleasure all the time, I would just enjoy it. I wouldn't have done the work. Or if I had been born as a ghost down in hell, then I wouldn't see the possibility of escape. And so also I wouldn't have had the chance. So getting this human birth, oh, how lucky it is to be born in this mixed bag, where we see that the possibility of that there is dukkha and there is the end of dukkha. And there's a way to the end of dukkha.
So it doesn't sound that different than proponents of hypnosis, positive psychology, Greek philosophers, that, you know, if one can only just convince oneself to reframe, have a positive outlook instead of a negative one. Is it different?
I think that like the positive psychology is an aspect of the preliminary training. So, like based on positive psychology, you can get as far as heaven, or you can get as far as like a balanced state of wellness. And it's actually in that position that the mind has got both a strong quality and a pliable quality, a receptive quality to be able to take on board the noble truths and work with it. So then the realization, like to go beyond that state of wellness, to go to the letting go of all concepts, clinging, attachments, and so forth, is something that can come on a ground of a basic psychological wellness. So it includes, there's a lot of ways in which Buddhism is like a great big self-help program, and but that's really the preliminary work.
Okay, thank you.
Richard.
Thank you, Aya. It's important to understand that even though the Buddha was a fully enlightened being, because he had taken birth in this life, he still had to get old, get sick, and die. So it's not that he got some magic power or something where he could keep himself young forever, he could keep himself healthy forever, or he could just dematerialize his body suddenly and go off somewhere, whatever. No, he's still subject to the laws of causation, the universal Dharma, objective reality, the way the universe works. And the Buddha said one time that, he said, if there was in this world no old age, no disease, no death, then a Tathagata would never appear in this world. Because you might still have birth, but okay, you have birth, now you're going to go on forever, no problems, no difficulties, no anything, you know, relatively speaking, right? So it wouldn't matter at all. And therefore, the Buddha said that in any doctrine where the Eightfold Path is absent, you know, that does not lead to solving the problem of birth and death, old age and disease, basically. I'm just sort of paraphrasing that part, but it's the Eightfold Doctrine coming out of as part of the Four Noble Truths, right? That's your way to overcome birth, you know, old age, disease, and death. So one's mind has to begin to accommodate those ideas. And so there's certain things in the sutras where the Buddha says, there is what is given, what is offered, what is sacrificed. There is fruit and result of good and bad actions. That's the law of causation. There is in this world, there is this world and other worlds. There is mother and father. There are beings who are reborn spontaneously. That means beings not on this plane. That's a misunderstanding. In the heavens, okay, you're born spontaneously. Mind-made bodies. There are good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins in the world who have themselves realized by direct knowledge and declare this world and the other world. So the Buddha actually says in certain suttas that this is the educated worldling at least has this much knowledge. The uneducated worldling thinks, no, these things are unimportant, right? Nihilism or something like that is reality. So you have to at least have this much intent in mind. Then you can start to pick up and understand what the Buddha is talking about and move forward. Okay, so you know, we're all facing the same things. You know, I like to think about nobody here gets out alive, you know. So as far as this body is concerned, we're all ultimately facing the same things, some sooner or later, some a little more difficulty and torturous than others. As Aya was saying, some of that has to do with, you know, what we inherit in our gene pool and that kind of stuff. What we've been exposed to in life. Maybe you got exposed to some chemical or something and it caused a problem like that. But ultimately, we're all basically trying to figure out the same thing and escape the same problems. And Buddha says this is why he left home, because there was old age, disease, and death. That was his motivating factor. He went, how can I overcome this? This isn't good. I don't like this idea, right? His mother died from his childbirth. You know, that must have weighed heavily on his mind, you know, when he finally found that out at some point in his existence, right? Because in the ancient society, if the mother dies in childbirth, it was kind of almost considered like the child was a little cursed, right? So when the Buddha was able to find this out, it probably bothered him a lot psychologically. And it's interesting to note that he leaves home shortly after his own wife gives birth to their first child. He was probably very psychologically perturbed and worried about that, you know, experience, and afraid that she was going to die, or maybe the child might not survive, or she might get terribly injured. You know, that was the number one cause of death in women in the ancient world, you know, was childbirth. So, you know, these things psychologically were probably weighing on his mind tremendously. And that's what made him really think a lot about, you know, old age, disease, and death. And so he set off on his quest to find out, you know, is there any way to overcome these things? And by our good fortune, he did. He figured it out. And now we have these teachings that can help us, you know, go beyond those things. We're all going to have to pass away in this life, but it doesn't mean that you have to take rebirth. You know, you can get out of that cycle of samsara of rebirth. Anyways, I probably talked a little too long, but
Okay.
when I hear people suffering and difficulty and pain, it weighs on my mind. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you all for your patient listening. We're going to close by giving respects to the Triple Gem. Aham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantam Bhagavate Suvakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamman Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Okay, goodbye.
Thank you,
Thank you
Venerable.
very much.
Thank you.